Hello, African Confessions. I am back with another episode. There is a message that was forwarded to me, and the message reads like this. Good morning, African Confessions. Can you please forward this message to Brother Nashi so that he can read it on your channel? I am one of your followers. There is a story that I want to talk about. This story, it is about my helper. My helper sacrificed my 3-year-old daughter. Please post this for me. As we are talking right now, my heart is bleeding and I can't stop crying. It has been more than 4 years and it still feels like it is yesterday. This whole thing feels like it just happened last night. I can't even forget this thing that happened to me. Every night when I go to sleep, I cry. The reason why I'll be crying, it is because naturally I can't fall asleep anymore. For me to fall asleep, I cry myself to sleep. When I am sleeping in my warm blankets, I feel so much guilt. My daughter will be feeling so cold, all alone in that grave. Whenever I eat, I ask myself, why am I eating? Right now, what is my daughter eating? I just wish that my daughter was right here with me. So many thoughts flood my mind and I Google everything, all the questions that I have for dead people. I search and still in my searching, I do not find any answers. My daughter went missing and writing this story, it is opening up old memories that keep on haunting me each and every day. Whenever I'll be alone, I'll keep on thinking about my daughter. It is not easy for me to tell you this story, my brother, but let me do my best. I am a single mom and I have 3 kids, or let me say I had 3 kids. Raising children on my own was not easy for me since their father had passed away. I had to go to another country so that I could get a job and work for my kids because where I come from, the economy is not so great. I found a job and God had been good towards me. I didn't struggle when I arrived in this foreign country. All of a sudden, I had found a good job. Within a few weeks upon my arrival in this foreign country, I met a friend who was a local who told me that at her workplace, they were looking for people to assist with data capturing. I was so grateful and I started working, and came month end, I got paid. This was like my first salary. Like I told you that in the country from where I come from, economically, things were not going so great. So this was like my first salary. I was so happy. I was so grateful and I started working. And when I got paid, the first thing I did was to send almost 3/4 of the money back home so that my mom could pay all the expenses and also find a helper who could come and take good care of my kids. By the way, at this point, my children were staying with my sister, but she had to go back to her place since she was married. She told me that she had stayed for a very long time with my kids and my mom back in the village, and her husband was already complaining, saying that, do you want to come back home, or you want to stay with your mother forever? So I was grateful that when I had arrived in this foreign country, God had came to me, and now that I was working, I could actually afford to get a helper. The first time when I thought of getting a helper for my mother didn't even believe it. She was like, are you even sure? What if we get a helper right now and that person works for the whole month and you are unable to pay for their salary? What am I going to do, my daughter? You know that back here in the village, I have nothing. I don't even have a goat or any livestock to sell so that I can pay off that helper's salary. Please, my daughter, why don't you just work maybe for 3 or to 4 months? When you are sure that permanently you are now employed, that is when we can start looking for a helper. I think it is a bad decision. You know, Brother Nashi, when they tell you that God is about to bless you, you won't even believe it. It actually took a very long time for my own mother to believe the fact that God had finally opened the floodgates of heaven and blessings were falling upon my head. blessings after blessings, because in no time I was called by the human resource manager, and she told me that I had just gotten a promotion and I was actually being transferred from the branch that I was working. I was supposed now to be working in the main branch. In no time, Brother Nashi, I had been promoted. So my mother then went ahead and she looked for a helper, and she was a kind-hearted lady. 2 months later, I traveled back and I found the kids in a great mood. They were well taken care of and everything at home was in a good state. Years went by and this lady became part of our life, very reliable. I trusted her with my own life. Yes, there were days when I would think maybe I'll be just sleeping in my bed, and I would tell God that even right now, God, if you were to take my life, I know that this lady that is now taking care of my kids, she will never abandon my kids, because she had actually shown me and my mother that she was doing this not for the money, but she was actually doing it for the love she had for my kids. I don't know what happened to her, because one day I received a text message that my last born child had suddenly gone missing. How could she go missing at first? I thought maybe she had went to play with their friends and she would be back home in no time, but I was wrong. They tried looking for my child for many hours, but still they could not find my child. That is when my mother told me that they had been advised that they had to go to the police station so that they can make a police report for a missing person. My eldest child called me later that night and she said she was not home yet. She was only a toddler, so this was serious. I started panicking and I felt cold my entire body. I was so desperate. Here I was in a foreign country, but I kept on giving orders back home, telling my mother and my kids that they had to rush to the police and to report this case. I was filled with fear. I kept on asking myself, where was my daughter? I kept on crying unto God, saying, oh God, she is but only a little girl. What will happen to her? Who has my girl right now? I thought that maybe there was a man who had kidnapped my daughter, but I kept on giving myself hope, saying that maybe they will return her back to my mother. God created women with instincts, and I also felt that I was supposed to be there to protect my daughter. I felt as if I had failed God, because here I was chasing after money, yet I had failed to protect my own kids. Yes, financially I was trying to give them a good life, but physically I was never there. As the police kept on questioning and taking statements, that is when I discovered that when they woke up in the morning, my girl was taken from the house, and while others were sleeping, there was no sign of forced entry, meaning that the only person who had the answers was the lady, the helper. It took time for the police to get to the bottom of the story. But what shocked me was that all this while, the helper was running up and down, searching throughout the neighborhood, throughout the village, and she was actually crying. This is the reports that were coming from the village. People were actually communicating with me via WhatsApp. They were saying that this lady, she was in so much stress. She was going around the village and she was crying, looking like a troubled woman who had just lost her own daughter. Yet she was the one who had sold my own daughter to those murderers. And the police had actually put out a missing person report. When I saw that missing person report from the police, my heart just sank. I was finished. I never thought that one day I'll be looking at a picture of my own daughter on the side, the police saying that they were actually looking for this girl. It was so strange to me. I thought that this thing could only happen to other people, not me. God, please give me strength. That is what I said. One morning, that is when I had the call, and I was actually preparing to get on the bus so that I can travel back home. That is when a phone call came in. It was my mother. When that phone call came in, I was shocked. As my phone was ringing, I knew that something was up. There was something wrong, and my heart was beating so fast. When I picked up the call, my mother on the other side, she was actually crying, and she told me that the police had came at our house in the morning and they had just took our helper. They had cuffed her. I was shocked. As I was speaking with my mother told me that she was walking over to our neighbor's house so that she can ask for transport, because she also wanted to go to the police station to hear what was going on. Because this lady, ever since she had arrived in our village, she had been taking good care of my children. My mother told me that when she arrived at the police station, she was taken to a private room, and whilst she was there was this other police officer who came and joined her in that private room. That is when my mother was told everything. That is when my mother was told by that police officer everything that they were suspecting. There was no other suspect other than this lady helper of ours, and the police officer said that there was evidence. This message came whilst I was on the bus. I didn't even know what to do anymore. I still remember that whilst we were at the border post waiting for our passports to get stamped, I didn't even know what to do anymore. I just kept on walking and walking around. Actually, there was another police officer who came and asked me, "What is going on with you?" Because I didn't even join the queue when people were going to get their passports stamped. When that police officer touched my shoulder, I just collapsed. The way that police officer touched my shoulder, it scared the hell out of me. I was shocked because I was in a world of my own. The next thing is that when I woke up, I saw that I was surrounded by people whilst we were on the bus. That is when they told me everything that had happened. That police officer that had touched me on my shoulder had given me the shock of my life. I don't know what he had said to me, but this is what happened. A lot of questions flooded my mind as we were traveling from the foreign country going back home, but there was no one that I could tell my own story. I kept on crying and crying. People who were sitting close to me thought that maybe I was going to a funeral. People kept on asking me, why was I crying? Was I going to attend a funeral? Maybe someone that I loved the most had recently died, but I could not even speak. I could not even drink anything. I felt so dehydrated, but whenever I would try to drink water or juice or anything, I would feel like vomiting. My body was just rejecting food. All that I wanted was to be there with my daughter. I kept on asking myself a lot of questions, and there was no one on that bus that could give me all the answers that I wanted. The only thing that I wanted from this lady, I wanted her to tell me, how could she do this to my own child? She was just a child. When I arrived back home, the maid had already been interrogated by the police, and I was told to go home and get some rest because everyone could see that I was not okay, because I was feeling dizzy. If I would try to walk, then I would just collapse. The police told me that I had to go back home so that they can continue with the investigations. My mother's relatives and some of my sisters, they came to the village to support me and also to find answers. The following morning, the police van came and they asked to speak to my brother and my mom and my aunt. As they were told, I heard my mom screaming her lungs out, and immediately I knew that something was just wrong. This was the end. The story had reached its climax. I was ready to die. I could feel it in my blood that my daughter was no more, and I didn't want anyone to say anything because already I knew that there was something wrong. Why was my mom screaming like that? I kept on crying like that, and already I was feeling weak. I had been crying for days and there was no strength left in me. I kept on crying. I stood up at once. I felt so much strength and I went to where my mother was. I wanted that policeman to give me the details of who, where, and when. I felt like I had lost my mind, and the people around me tried to hold me as hard as they could, but I pushed them away and I walked straight to that investigating officer. I screamed and I said, "Who did it?" I asked one word, looking at him straight into his eyes, and my whole face was shivering. I only needed an answer, and he said, "The lady, your helper, is the one who sent 2 men to come and get your daughter during the night, and those men are the ones that murdered your daughter. They harvested some of her body parts, and your daughter's body parts, we are suspecting that they are going to be used for money-making rituals. And your lady helper has told us that the agreement was that after doing all the money rituals, they were going to share with her some of the money that they were going to get from the money-making rituals. All that I wanted to see was my little girl. They took me to the mortuary, and when I went into the mortuary, I saw my little girl. She was sleeping. I had last seen her many months ago when I had traveled to that foreign country looking for a better opportunity. Here I was standing in the mortuary looking at my daughter. It was like she had grown, and her face showed that she was filled with fear when she died. Her eyes were open. She was scary. It was like she was screaming out loud, saying that, "Mommy, can you please come and rescuing me?" I don't want to say a lot, but yes, everything that they said was true. The males who had done this had left the country. They had put out a report trying to close the borders, but those guys, they had escaped the country. I don't know where they went. I wanted to see that evil woman, but the police would not let me get close to that woman. They told me that this matter was now in the hands of the police. I had to let the police do their work. I was filled with rage and I was angry like hell. I was boiling inside. I just wanted to finish her off, but there was no choice. She was already behind bars. I begged the police officers to arrest me so that I can be with that woman behind bars. I wanted to ask her a lot of questions. I was not going to let this pass. My daughter was buried, and she was given so much love with the people in our community back in the village. And here I was. I had failed to take care of my children. God had given me this responsibility, but I felt that I had failed him. I was angry with myself because I had failed, and I also wanted to deal with that woman. The desire of revenge filled my mind, and I was not going to let go. My mom kept on telling me to let go, but I was not in the position to let go. This was just an innocent girl. I'll come back with the rest of the story. Dear listeners, right there was a message that I received that was forwarded to me by one of our admins. The painful part is when she said, when she walked into the mortuary, as she was looking at her daughter, she saw that the way that she died, her eyes were wide open and her mouth was wide open as if she was screaming out of fear. Please let us try to speak with her in the comment section.